She was sitting in the back of a black car, with a card she hadn't put down yet. Matte black. No logo, no title, no company name. Just Jin Soo. One word. Embossed so lightly, you had to tilt it toward the window light to confirm it was even there. Outside, Atlanta was still awake. Restaurant lights, late traffic, couples laughing on sidewalks like the night was ordinary. Like somewhere across the city, an engagement party had not just rearranged the entire architecture of Keisha Daniels's life. She was still in the sequined black gown, still wearing the drop earrings she had chosen that morning, when she thought the hardest thing about tonight would be seeing Darius smile at someone else. Her back was still bare, her bun still precise, her posture still straight. She had not let herself collapse in the ballroom. She was not going to collapse in a car either. But her hands were not as calm as the rest of her. She turned the card over once, then again. Then she set it flat on her knee and looked out at the city and told herself the night was done. And then her phone lit up. Unknown number, no name, no area code she recognized. One message. Don't answer when Darius calls tonight. He is not reaching out for you. He is reaching out for what you know. Keisha read it twice. She did not respond. She did not put the phone down either. 53 seconds later, she counted, without meaning to. Her screen filled with a name she had not deleted. Darius. Not a text, a call. Full contact photo. His best professional headshot. The one he had used for 3 years because it made his jaw look stronger. The phone rang 4 times in her hand. She watched it ring. She did not answer. And in the silence after it stopped, something settled in her chest that was not peace and was not grief. It was something older and colder and far more useful than either. Clarity. Because men like Darius did not reach backward. They were architects of forward momentum, of polished surfaces and controlled entrances. They did not call exes after midnight at their own engagement parties, unless something ahead of them was already burning. And somewhere across Atlanta, in whatever quiet room, a man with black gloves and a midnight navy tuxedo had disappeared to. A man who had pulled out her chair like it was a declaration, who had called her beautiful, in a room full of people trying to perform it. That man had already seen the fire coming. He had seen it before Darius did. He had seen it before she did. Keisha looked down at the card. Jin Soo. She had walked out of the Whitmore Grand thinking the engagement party was the event. The thing she had survived. The story she would eventually tell at dinner somewhere. Laughing. Because she had come out of it whole. But sitting in that car, sequins cold against her skin, Atlanta sliding past in amber and gold, Keisha understood something that made the hair at the back of her neck stand without warning. The ballroom was not the story. It was the opening scene. And whoever had sent that text, whoever had watched Darius closely enough to predict his panic down to the minute, had already written several chapters ahead of her. She was not afraid. She was paying attention. And for the first time in longer than she could name, those 2 things felt exactly like enough. And this is the story of Keisha Daniels. A woman who spent years building something extraordinary for a man who only knew how to claim it. A woman who walked into an engagement party as background and walked out as the most dangerous person in the room. And the quiet, precise, controlled Korean Mafia boss who saw her clearly. Not because he wanted something from her, but because he recognized something in her that she had almost stopped recognizing in herself. But before we get to what happens next, you need to understand what Keisha was carrying when she got into that car. You need to understand what 6 years of invisible work looks like, what it costs, what it leaves behind, and what it means when the wrong man finally realizes, too late, exactly what he threw away. Subscribe to see how this unfolds. And Hidden Circle, Tell me where you're watching from tonight. I'd love to say hello. Keisha made it to the 14th floor before she took off her heels. She carried them the rest of the way down the hallway, one in each hand, sequins catching the corridor light, and did not unlock her door until she had stood outside it for a full 10 seconds, breathing the way her therapist had taught her 3 years ago when she first started understanding that composure and healing were not the same thing. Inside, the apartment was exactly as she had left it. Clean lines, warm lamplight on a timer, a half-read book on the coffee table with a receipt as a bookmark, because she never remembered where she put actual bookmarks. Everything ordered. Everything hers. She set the heels by the door, set her clutch on the console table, reached inside and pulled out the card before she did anything else, because she had a feeling that if she put the clutch down without removing it first, she would spend the rest of the night pretending she wasn't thinking about it. She held it under the entryway light. Jin Soo. The embossing was so subtle, it felt intentional. Like a man who had decided long ago that anyone worth reaching him would look closely enough to find him, and everyone else was not his concern. Keisha set the card on the kitchen counter, poured herself a glass of water she didn't drink, stood in the middle of her living room in a $3,200 gown at 11:47 at night, and tried to locate the version of herself who had gotten dressed that morning with a plan. She had planned to arrive, to look exactly like this, to let Darius see her whole and unhurried, to let that image do its quiet work, and then to leave before the evening had a chance to cost her anything. She had not planned for Jin Soo. She had not planned for a man in black gloves to pull out her chair with the unhurried certainty of someone who had already decided what the room deserved to witness. She had not planned for him to lean close enough that she could smell the faint cedar of his jacket and say the single word beautiful, the way a judge reads a verdict. Not for the room, not for performance, but for the record. She had not planned to leave with a card that felt heavier than it looked, and she had absolutely not planned for a warning text from an unknown number that arrived with the precision of someone who had already mapped the next 4 moves on a board she was only now realizing she was sitting at. She changed out of the gown slowly, hung it with the care it deserved, washed her face with the methodical attention she gave everything when she was using routine to hold herself level. And she had just pulled her hair loose and was sitting on the edge of the bed when her phone lit up again. Same unknown number. He called, didn't he? Not a question. Keisha stared at the screen. Her thumbs hovered. She typed and deleted twice before she finally wrote back 3 words. Who is this? The response came in under a minute. Someone who watched him look at you when he thought no one was watching him. She read it 3 times. Then she set the phone face down on the nightstand and lay back and looked at the ceiling and understood, with a certainty that settled in her sternum like something finally clicking into alignment, that sleep was not coming for a long while. She found out the next morning that Darius had called again at 2 a.m. She had been asleep by then. Finally, the phone still face down, and when she turned it over to the gray Atlanta morning light coming through the curtains, she saw the missed call and the voicemail notification sitting there, like something that had been waiting patiently for her to be ready. She did not listen to it. She made coffee instead. She stood at the counter in her robe, with both hands around the mug, and looked at Jin Soo's card where she had left it the night before. In the daylight, it looked even more restrained. No flourish, no design. Just the name, and the faint ghost of a phone number on the back that she had not noticed the night before, printed in a gray so close to the black of the card that you only saw it when the light hit it directly. And she photographed the card. She did not know why. It felt like documentation. At 9:14, her phone rang from a number she recognized this time. Camille, her closest friend, who had gotten the party recap via a 7-minute voice note at midnight and was now, clearly, awake and uncontainable. I need you to start from the chair, Camille said, before Keisha had finished saying hello. Good morning to you too. Keisha, the man pulled out your chair with gloves on, at Darius's engagement party. I have been lying awake. You were asleep. I texted you at midnight and you didn't respond for 6 hours. I was asleep processing. There's a difference. A pause. Are you okay? And there it was. The real question. Underneath all the energy. Camille always got there eventually. Keisha looked out the window. A Saturday morning in Atlanta. Ordinary light. Somewhere across the city, Darius Washington was waking up next to his fiancée, in whatever curated luxury he had built his life inside. And the version of that life that included Keisha Daniels as its silent foundation was currently showing its first visible cracks. I'm better than okay, Keisha said, and she meant it, which surprised her a little. I'm thinking clearly. That's what worries me, Camille said. When you get quiet and clear, things start moving. Things are already moving. I didn't start them. She heard Camille sit up on the other end of the line. Tell me about the text. So she did. All of it. The warning message. The timing. The second text after she hadn't answered Darius's call. The question that had sat with her through the thin early hours of the morning, which was not who is this man, but something sharper and stranger. How did he know Darius would call? And how did he know the call wasn't really about me? Camille was quiet for a moment after she finished, which meant she was taking it seriously, because Camille's default was noise. He told you not to answer before Darius even called, Camille said slowly. Yes. So either he knows Darius well enough to predict him by the minute. Or, Keisha said, he knows men like Darius well enough that it doesn't matter which one it is. The pattern is the same. Another silence. Keisha, Camille said. That man did not pull out your chair because the seat was empty. She listened to the voicemail at noon. Darius's voice was controlled in the way she had watched him practice for years. The same measured tone he used in boardrooms when a deal was shifting in a direction he hadn't prepared for. Low, unhurried on the surface. But she had spent enough time next to that voice to hear the frequency underneath it. The slight tightening around certain words that meant his jaw was working harder than his tone admitted. Keisha, I know it's late, and I know tonight was a lot. I wanted to make sure you were okay. You left quickly, and I didn't get a chance to. I think we should talk. There are some things about the current business situation that I think you've gotten a certain impression of, and I want to make sure you have the full picture. Call me when you can. She played it once. Then she set the phone down. Some things about the current business situation. Not, I miss you. Not, seeing you tonight reminded me of what we had. Not even the soft manipulation of I've been thinking about you. He had skipped all of it and gone straight to business situation and the full picture. He was not calling because she had looked beautiful in a room full of people who noticed. He was not calling because watching Jin Soo pull out her chair with that deliberate, gloved certainty had cracked something open in him. He was calling because he was afraid of what she knew. And the thing was, she hadn't even known. Not fully. Not yet. What she actually knew. But his call had just told her it was significant. His call had just handed her a piece of information he hadn't meant to give. She did not call him back. Instead, she opened her laptop and spent the next 2 hours doing something she had been unconsciously avoiding for months. She went back through the early years. The emails she had kept in an archived folder she almost never opened. The spreadsheets she had built for him when his first company was a concept and a prayer, and she had been the one translating his ambition into operational reality. The strategic memos she had written that he had presented in rooms she wasn't invited into. The decisions she had quietly corrected before they became disasters. The kind of correction that leaves no trace, because it happens before anything breaks. She read through all of it with the detached precision of someone reviewing evidence. And somewhere around the third hour, a feeling moved through her that was not quite anger and not quite grief. It was something more like recognition. The specific, clarifying sensation of finally seeing a shape you had been living inside for so long you had stopped noticing its dimensions. She had not just helped Darius Washington. She had been the architecture. He texted Sunday morning, then Sunday afternoon. The text had the same careful construction as the voicemail. Concern on the surface, excavation underneath. Just want to make sure you're all right. We should catch up properly. I think you deserve to hear some context. Each one calibrated to sound generous while asking her to open a door. She read them. She did not respond. What she was doing instead was thinking about the second meeting. Because there was going to be a second meeting. She felt it with the same certainty she felt weather changes. Not psychic, just attuned. Jin Soo had not given her his card as a courtesy. Men like him did not operate in courtesies. He had given her his card because he intended for it to be used, and the text messages from that unknown number, which she was now almost entirely certain had come from someone in his orbit, if not from him directly, had already confirmed that the distance between Friday night and whatever came next was not going to be very long. She was right. Sunday evening, a message came from the unknown number again. Tomorrow. 7 p.m., Sora, private dining. Come as you are, meaning, don't dress for him, dress for yourself. She stared at the last line for a long time. Don't dress for him, dress for yourself. She didn't know how he knew that she had worn Friday's gown partly as armor, and that she had stood in her closet for 40 minutes, choosing the most precise version of, I have moved on, and I look extraordinary, and then put it on, and walked into that ballroom, and aimed herself at Darius's perception like a signal. She didn't know how he knew, but he did. She typed back, Who am I meeting? The response came immediately. Someone who has already closed one conversation and is interested in opening another. Sora was the kind of restaurant that didn't need a sign. It sat on the upper floor of a building in Buckhead, accessible through a lobby that looked like a private residence, and an elevator that required a code she had been sent 90 minutes before arrival. The dining room was small, 8 tables at most, and the lighting was the warm, low amber of a room designed for conversations that mattered. Jin Soo was already seated when she arrived. He stood when she entered. Not the performative rise of a man who had been taught manners, but the unhurried, complete attention of someone who had decided before she walked in that she was worth standing for. He was not wearing gloves tonight. Dark charcoal suit, no tie, collar open one button. His hands visible now. Steady, deliberate. The hands of someone who had made difficult decisions with them and carried no visible regret about any of it. You came, he said. I almost didn't, she said. Which was not true, but felt like the right kind of honesty for the opening of whatever this was. Something shifted at the edge of his expression. Not quite a smile. The acknowledgement of one. Sit, he said. Please. He did not pull out her chair this time. She noticed. She thought he intended her to notice. They ordered without consulting each other on preferences, which she found she liked. A quiet declaration of independence at a table that could have easily become a performance. He drank water. She ordered a glass of something dry and Burgundian. The food, when it came, was extraordinary, and neither of them made a production of noticing. For the first 20 minutes, they talked around the edges of Friday night. He asked about her work. She was a creative director at a mid-sized brand consultancy, the kind of role she had built methodically after spending the first years of her career putting someone else's vision in order He listened the way few people listened, which was completely, and with his eyes steady, and his phone nowhere visible, and no indication that any part of his attention was somewhere else. Then, he set down his water glass and said, "He called you." Not a question. You knew he would. "I know how men behave when they realize they've miscalculated," he said. "Darius Washington miscalculated badly on Friday. He'll spend the next several weeks trying to understand how." And the text, the warning. She looked at him directly. "That was you." He didn't confirm or deny immediately. He looked at her with that same unreadable evenness, the gaze of someone who had learned a long time ago that silence was more honest than explanation. "I wanted you to have the information before he reached you," he said finally. "What you did with it was your decision." I didn't answer. "I know." "How do you know?" "Because he called me at midnight instead," Jinsu said. "When he couldn't reach you, he called me. To feel out what the evening had meant. To see if there was still room for the relationship to continue." Keisha set her glass down slowly. "What did you tell him?" Jinsu's expression did not change, but something behind his eyes settled into a finality so complete, it was almost audible. "I told him I would be in touch," he said. "Which is what you say when you have already made your decision, and you are giving someone the courtesy of not learning it in real time." The restaurant was quiet around them. Somewhere in the kitchen, something sizzled briefly and stopped. A soft exchange between two staff members at the far end of the room, and the city outside the window doing what cities did, indifferent and luminous. "His financing," Keisha said. It was not a question. She had been assembling pieces since Friday, and this one had clarified itself over the weekend, without her quite deciding to focus on it. "His expansion is over-leveraged," Jinsu said simply. "He took on obligations he cannot currently meet. He believed the relationships he'd built over the last several years would provide a cushion. They won't." "Not anymore," he said, and the two words carried the weight of a door being shut from the inside. She looked at him. The chandelier light was gold and warm in the room, the same register as the Whitmore Grand on Friday, but quieter, more honest somehow. Like the difference between a stage and a room where people actually lived. "You're telling me this," she said, "just because you think I should know, not because I need to act on it." "I'm telling you this," he said, "because you already knew most of it. You built enough of it to understand how it works." He paused. "You just spent years allowing him to present it as his." The sentence landed with the precision of something that had been thought through carefully before being said. Keisha did not answer immediately. She felt the truth of it move through her, the way truth sometimes does. Not like a revelation, but like a confirmation of something your body already understood, before your mind had the language for it. "That's the thing about building someone else's architecture," she said finally. "You get so good at making it look like theirs that eventually you can't tell the difference between humility and erasure." Jinsu looked at her, and this time, what she saw in his expression was not the controlled neutrality he moved through the world inside. It was something quieter and more unguarded. The look of a man who had not expected to be surprised by a sentence, and had just been. "That is the most precise description of it I have ever heard," he said. They stayed at that table for another hour and 40 minutes. She drove home alone, which she had wanted to, and he had understood, without being told. The card was still on her kitchen counter when she got back. She picked it up and looked at it one more time, and then she set it in the small ceramic dish beside her keys, where she kept things she intended to keep. Her phone had 3 more texts from Darius. She read them the way you read a weather report for a city you no longer lived in. Noted and irrelevant. She was not angry at him tonight. She had expected to be, had braced for the wave of it. But what she felt instead was something cleaner and more permanent. She understood now what he had taken, not in the way of a woman rehearsing grievances, but in the way of a woman standing at the complete edge of a season and being able to finally see its entire shape. She had given 6 years of her clearest thinking to a man who had needed it desperately, and had repaid it by making himself the only visible name on the building. She had been the foundation, and he had been the facade, and she had allowed it. Not out of weakness, she understood now, but out of a belief that love and partnership meant being willing to be invisible for someone. She had learned, sitting across a quiet table from a man in charcoal and no gloves, and that there was a difference between choosing invisibility for love and having it chosen for you. She had been doing the latter for years, and calling it the former. The night Darius had introduced his fiancée at the Whitmore Grand, she had walked in hoping to prove she had survived him. She was walking out of this weekend, understanding something larger. She had survived herself, the version of herself who had shrunk and stabilized and built and erased and called it devotion. That woman had gotten her last assignment. She started with the emails, not because she was building a case. She told herself that clearly, more than once, as she opened the archived folder again, Monday morning, with coffee going cold beside her laptop. She was not building a case. She was not preparing for a confrontation. She was simply doing what she had always done, which was understand the full structure of a thing before she decided what to do with it. The emails went back 6 years. There was the market analysis she had written for his first major pitch. 47 pages, sourced and formatted, and argued with the kind of rigor she had learned in the graduate program Darius had always said he respected, but had never once asked about directly. He had presented it to 3 investors. 2 of them had funded him. She had been introduced at the dinner afterward as his girlfriend. There was the operational restructuring she had quietly designed after his second company nearly collapsed under the weight of a hiring decision she had told him not to make. She had not said "I told you so." She had simply stayed up for 9 days, building the framework that kept it standing. The press release 6 months later had quoted Darius on his instincts for recovery. There were the vendor relationships she had managed, the contract language she had quietly corrected, the strategic pivots she had framed as his ideas in rooms full of people who would have funded the idea, but not the woman behind it. And she had known that, and she had made her peace with it, and she had called that peace maturity. She read through all of it now and felt something she could not quite name for the first few minutes, until she realized what it was. She was not angry at Darius. She was grieving herself. The woman in those emails was extraordinary, sharp and tireless, and so thoroughly committed to building something that she had simply accepted the condition that her name would not be on it. And she had done it out of love. Yes. She believed that. She did not want to revise it into something uglier than it was. But she had also done it because somewhere along the way, she had absorbed the idea that her value was most legible when it was in service of someone else's visibility. She closed the laptop. She sat with that for a long time. Camille came over Tuesday evening with food from the Jamaican place on Peachtree that they had been ordering from since graduate school, and they ate at the kitchen counter the way they had eaten 1,000 meals. Containers open, no ceremony. The ease of 2 women who had seen each other through enough that pretense had long ago become unnecessary. Keisha told her about the dinner at Sora. Camille listened the way she listened when something actually mattered to her, which was with her fork suspended and her full face turned, and none of the ambient commentary she usually ran underneath conversations. When Keisha finished, Camille set her fork down. "He told you Darius called him when you didn't answer." "Yes." So Darius went from calling his ex-girlfriend at midnight to calling the man who publicly humiliated him at his own engagement party. At what, 1 in the morning? Apparently, Camille was quiet for a moment. Keisha, that man is unraveling. I know. And Jinsu told you all of this? He told me what was relevant, Keisha said. He didn't perform it. He didn't use it to position himself. He just laid it out. The way you describe a weather system. Here is what is happening. Here is what is coming. Camille looked at her for a long moment. And how did that feel? Keisha considered the question seriously, because it deserved seriousness. Like being spoken to at full volume, she said. For the first time in a long time. Camille picked her fork back up. She nodded slowly, in the way that meant she was filing something carefully, and would return to it later. Just be careful, she said. Not because he seems dangerous. Because you are in the middle of something that is still moving, and men like that, the ones who see clearly, they can become a different kind of gravity. Keisha understood what she meant. She had thought it herself. Jinsu's clarity was not safe in the way that ordinary things were safe. It was the kind of quality that could become its own pull. You could start orienting toward it without noticing. The way you don't notice you're facing the sun until you turn away and realize everything else looks dim. She was watching for that. But she was also, for the first time in years, not shrinking from what she felt in order to seem appropriately cautious. That had been another version of the same old habit. Performing restraint as a substitute for self-protection. She knew the difference now. Darius called Wednesday afternoon from his office line. She answered because she had decided, somewhere in the quiet of Tuesday night, that she was ready, and that she had gathered everything she needed to gather, and there was nothing left to prepare. And the conversation that was coming had been coming for 6 years, and she was done letting it wait. Keisha. His voice had the boardroom register again, the controlled warmth of a man who had prepared for this. Thank you for picking up. What do you need, Darius? A brief pause. He had not expected that opening. He had expected softness, or at least the old courtesy. Of course, how are you that she had always offered him. The reflexive accommodation that had been so consistent, he had probably stopped registering it as a choice she made. I think we should meet, he said. In person. There are things I want to say to you that I don't want to do over the phone. You can say them now. Another pause. Longer. And I've been thinking about us, he said. About the early years. I don't think I handled certain things as well as I should have. I want you to know that I'm going to stop you, Keisha said. Her voice was even. Not cold, not heated. Simply exact. Because I've been thinking about the early years too. And I want to tell you what I've been thinking, and I want you to listen. Silence on the line. I built the pitch deck that got your first round of serious funding, she said. I rewrote the operation structure after the 2019 near collapse. I managed the Hendricks account relationship for 14 months because you and Marcus couldn't be in the same room, and the Hendricks account was 30% of your revenue that year. I corrected the Mercer contract language the night before signing because the original version had a liability clause that would have exposed you personally, and you hadn't read it closely enough to catch it. She paused. I did all of that because I loved you, and I believed in what you were building. But I also did it because I had made myself into someone whose value was most useful when it was invisible. And you let me do that. And then you went and built a life on top of it and introduced me to the room as your ex-girlfriend. The silence on the other end was different now. It was not the prepared silence of a man waiting for his turn to reframe. It was the silence of a man who had just heard something true, said aloud in his direction for the first time, and did not yet have a structure for responding to it. Keisha, I'm not asking for an apology, she said. I want to be clear about that. I'm not calling this because I need you to confess anything. I'm saying it because I spent years converting what happened between us into composure, and I'm done doing that. I know what I built. I know what I gave. And I know that the panic in your voice every time you've called me this week has nothing to do with missing me, and everything to do with the fact that Jinsu Park is no longer in your corner, and you thought I might be useful in changing that. A long breath on the other end of the line. Not quite anger. Something rawer than that. You don't know what you're stepping into with him, Darius said. His voice had dropped. The boardroom register was gone now. What was underneath it was less polished and more real. A man without his performance, which was, she thought, the most honest version of him she had heard in years. His world is not what it looks like, Keisha. I'm not saying this to control you. I'm saying it because I know things about who he is and how he operates that you don't. Then maybe, she said quietly, you should have thought about that before you built 6 years of business on a foundation you were going to discard. She did not say it with venom. She said it with the simple finality of someone closing a door they had been standing in front of for a very long time. Darius didn't respond. Take care of yourself, she said. And take care of Priya. She deserves to know what she's actually standing inside. She ended the call, set the phone face down on the desk, and sat quietly in the late afternoon light of her apartment. Her apartment. Her name on the lease, her books on the shelves, her carefully ordered life that she had built entirely for herself in the years since she had stopped building things for someone who wouldn't name her, and let herself feel the full weight of what had just happened. Not triumph, not relief, exactly. Something more permanent. The sensation of a debt to yourself, long overdue, finally being settled. She did not find out about Priya directly. It came through Camille, who had a friend adjacent to Darius's social circle, who mentioned almost in passing that Priya Mehta had been asking questions. Quietly, privately, in the particular way that sincere people asked questions when they had begun to understand that the story they were living had chapters they hadn't been shown. Priya was not dramatic. From everything Keisha had observed in the brief electric minutes of the engagement party, she was thoughtful and genuinely feeling. A woman who had arrived at that ballroom in a blush tulle gown with wide eyes and real warmth, who had looked at Keisha across the room with an expression that was not cruelty or competition, but something closer to recognition. Two women on different sides of the same man's narrative, each missing pieces the other held. She had started asking about the business, about the timeline, about certain decisions Darius described as instinct, and certain relationships he described as his own, that when she pulled on the threads, did not quite hold the shape he had given them. Keisha did not reach out to her. It was not her role to dismantle what Priya and Darius were building, and she did not want it to be. But she hoped, quietly and seriously, that Priya would keep pulling threads. Not out of vengeance, not on Keisha's behalf. Simply because a sincere person deserved to stand inside the real story. And sincere people, when they finally understood they had been standing inside a curated version, tended to ask for truth with a steadiness that was harder to deflect than anger. She met Jinsu one more time before the month was out. He had suggested a walk, which surprised her, because nothing about him read as someone who moved through the world on foot and in the open. But he had texted early on a Saturday morning and said simply, "There is a good hour of light right now, if you're free." She was free. They walked along the Beltline in the soft morning, the city gentler at that hour, and he talked to her differently than he had at Sora. Less architecture, more interior. He told her about building his own first company at 26 in Seoul, and the mentor who had taken credit for the foundational idea, and the years it had taken him to understand that his silence about it had been its own kind of participation. He told her this without bitterness, with the same calibrated evenness he brought to everything. But she heard the thing underneath it, which was a man telling a woman, "I have been here." Not the same room, but the same shape of room. I know what that cost. She did not perform vulnerability in return. She did not feel the need to. She simply walked beside him and spoke with the directness she had been practicing, in small increments, since the night she had sat in the back of a car with his matte black card and understood that the version of herself who had disappeared into someone else's story was not coming back. At one point he said, "What do you want to do next, with the work?" Not "what are your plans," or "where do you see yourself?" The interview phrasing she was used to. Just, "What do you want?" She thought about it for half a block before she answered. "I want to build something with my name on it," she said. "Not because I need the credit, because I want to know what it looks like when the thing I build is also the thing people associate with me. I want to see that once." He nodded, said nothing for a moment. Then, "When you're ready to talk about what that looks like, I know people worth talking to." She glanced at him. "Not an offer," he said. "Not a condition. Just a door." She looked back at the path ahead of them. The morning light was doing something beautiful to the trees. That particular early quality of it, gold and not yet warm, the kind of light that made everything look like it was right before something began. "I'll remember that," she said. They walked the rest of the hour without urgency. He did not ask her anything she wasn't ready to answer. She did not perform anything she didn't feel. There was no dramatic declaration at the end, no cinematic turn toward each other, with the skyline behind them. He simply walked her to where she had parked, stood at a reasonable distance with his hands in his jacket pockets, looked at her in that way he had, complete and unhurried, like she was worth seeing at full resolution. "You're different than you were on Friday," he said. "Friday was 10 days ago." "I know," he said. "That's what I mean." She understood. She did not deflect it. "Take care," she said. "You too," he said. And the weight he put on those two words, quiet and meant, and carrying something she did not yet have a name for, stayed with her all the way home. She opened a new document that night. Not the archived folder, not the old emails, not the record of what she had built for someone else. A new one. Empty and unheld by anyone else's history. She typed a single line at the top. "What I know how to do." And then she started listing. Not humbly, not with the old reflex of underselling herself to seem appropriately modest. Fully. Accurately. The way you inventory something valuable when you have finally decided to stop pretending it belongs to someone else. She listed for 40 minutes. By the end, the document was 3 pages. She read it back once, slowly, and felt the same sensation she had felt in the car 10 days ago, when she had understood that the engagement party was not the story, but softer now, and warmer, and pointing forward instead of inward. She was not the woman who had survived the room anymore. She never really had been. Not the full truth of it. She was the woman who had understood the room better than anyone inside it. For years. Quietly, and without acknowledgement, and had finally decided that understanding was worth something. Not to Darius. Not as a function of Jinsu's recognition, however clean and real that recognition had felt. Worth something to herself. That was the place she had been trying to get to. Not dignity held together by composure. Not survival dressed up as grace. Just a woman at her own desk, in her own light, finally writing her own name at the top of the thing she built. She saved the document. She closed the laptop. And for the first time in longer than she could honestly remember, she went to sleep without carrying anyone else's weight into the dark with her.